Hello there. Welcome to episode 31 of Bow and Blade, a podcast brought to you by Medievalist.net, your home for all things medieval on the internet. Bow and Blade gives you a seat at the bar as scholars of medieval warfare go beyond the Wikipedia articles to talk about the debates and the questions that we're working on today.
Literally today.
But today, we're not at a bar.
No.
We're at stage 3 at the University of Leeds. At the International Medieval that's where we are, right?
Right.
Okay. And we're recording this in front of a live studio audience.
Are they live? Have we checked it?
If you
Check the pulse.
If
Check the
you
pulse.
didn't hear that, they were clapping. Some of them were weeping.
Jeering.
3 people threw their undergarments at Kelly, but
I'm wearing them.
But that was just me. What do you? I didn't know.
We got to announce who we are. They won't know who we are.
Right.
I'm
Michael Livingston, professor at the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina.
Go Citadel. I am Kelly DeVries, professor of history at Loyola University, Maryland, and coming up next year, because evidently there's a lot of medieval Air Force, I'm going to be at the U.S. Air Force Academy.
You will indeed. You will indeed.
Yeah.
What are you drinking tonight at the bar, Kelly?
Well, I'll tell you, because we are actually only drinking water. Boo.
Legally.
Boo, legally. But I've got the Iberian contingency here, and you know my favorite wines.
You do
Portuguese red.
You do like a Portuguese red.
I do. A whole bottle, by the way.
A whole bottle.
Yeah.
A whole bottle. Yeah, we aren't, and I am, this is for posterity as well, in case anybody from Leeds is listening. We listened. We're not supposed to drink at stage 3, so we're not currently drinking. We just drank a lot before we came. What did I have? It was some sort of cider.
I don't know, but you haven't mentioned what you've got now.
Thatcher
Haze.
Thatcher Haze, I believe
Cider,
I had. Several pints of that, and I'm currently drinking water.
Water.
Yes.
With nothing in it. It's water in a glass, or in a cup.
In a glorious plastic cup.
Does everybody here know why we announce what we drink at the beginning of every session? Okay, we've got a few, but some don't. So Mike and I have written a couple of books together, and the first one was 3. First one was a book on the Battle of Caen, a case book. And we'd write our bits, a lot of translation, there's 80 sources in there, and we would go to restaurants and bars and edit at night. And then I took everything off on taxes. So we put 2...
we did better than that.
We did better because we acknowledged 2 bartenders, 2 restaurant owners, and 2 chefs. And I'll tell you, we gave them back each a book. And I think we got free food after that at bar.
Oh man, yeah. You show up they're not paying. That's damn right we're not paying.
No.
You're in the book, buddy.
But there was one too. You remember the time we're at the wine bar, and suddenly it occurred to me what that word at the Battle of Caen was, because it was a Dutch word, and it was like I almost did the wave myself.
It was quite embarrassing.
It was quite embarrassing. Yeah. To all the other people who were there at the wine bar, were a little bit higher class than we were. That wasn't hard.
A little bit. Yeah, it was not hard. They were extremely higher class than we were. That was pretty wild. I remember that.
Yeah.
That was at Vintage. If anybody wants to.
Well, yeah. Vintage. We still go to Vintage.
We still go. But yeah, so we're going to do, we have a couple things we want to talk about, and we have a couple questions, existing questions. If you listen to our last episode.
Has it dropped, Peter? The last
episode?
Okay,
it dropped.
All right.
Immensely embarrassed. Well, I mean, I don't
know.
It's probably hilarious. To actually listen to the whole thing. Because, Kelly dropped out midway through. So we have a recording of me, and just me, right? And it was like, this is going to be great.
And long pauses in between just you.
Yeah, just long pauses. There's just silence, and then me going, yes, of course. So rather than treat you all of that, I recorded a sort of sorry we screwed up in a hotel room.
Yeah.
Where even were we? It's in France.
Was it in Bordeaux?
Was it in Bordeaux? Probably was in Bordeaux.
Just to keep you up to date, is we have actually been, surprise, going to battlefields.
As one does.
As one does. In fact, Mike was there today. Tell him what battle you were at.
Yeah, I was at Shrewsbury today. I was recording a documentary at the Battle of Shrewsbury today, which was terrific, absolutely terrific. And one of the wonderful things about doing something like that is they give you access to everything.
Yeah, they do.
They do. The documentary company was like talking to them, and they're like, "Well, normally people shoot here," and they're like, "Livingston's going to want to walk everywhere and look at everything.
God,
we have no idea where he's going to end up." So they're like, "Oh, well, whatever, walk wherever you want." It was great.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
awesome. So yeah, there we were doing Caen and Poitiers. Now let's start there.
Yeah, start there.
Let's start there. Let's start with
which one? With the first,
Let's start
chronologically, or the first one we visited?
No, screw it. Let's start with Caen.
Caen.
Let's start with Caen. So we go to Caen, and we should point out we were not there alone.
No,
We had company.
We weren't there. Yeah, I think we had a chaperone, was what he's called.
Chaperone?
Chaperone. Would you call yourself a
What
chaperone?
would you call yourself a chaperone, Bob?
Yeah.
For the record, Bob just made a horrifying groan, like
Yeah,
he's trying
I
to force something out, and
yeah.
I'm worried. He's in the front row.
I think the responsible adult.
Responsible adult.
Can you imagine Bob Wisdom Savage being a responsible adult anywhere by anybody's definition?
It's a bad scene. Bob Wisdom Savage, we've mentioned him on the show before.
A few times.
A absolutely wonderful, wonderful friend and mentor.
Mentor?
Former man for me. For you,
Gopher?
Yeah.
Gopher.
Yeah, Bob is a good man from the Royal Armouries. We love him. We adore him. We've traveled with him, 3-4 times on these things?
Yeah, he keeps showing up.
Yeah, he watches the Twitter feed and then is like, I'm here.
There's Bob suddenly.
Like, I can't say no to him now.
The really funny thing is they're trying to find each other in King's Cross Station. And I'm getting these texts from both of them. I can't find Mike. I can't find Bob. And I'm thinking, just go to the Harry Potter part. You'll find each other. You know, I know Bob's standing there. It won't go through.
It won't go through. I keep smashing 9 3/4. It's not getting through.
Yeah.
With that beard, of
Yeah.
course, you're a wizard, sir.
Back to Castiel. By the way,
yeah.
we are in England. Should we?
What?
It's where England loses the 100 Years' War.
Oh, yeah.
Don't tell anybody.
Yeah, y'all lost that. Also, happy 4th of July, everybody. Happy winning treason, yay.
That's true. Do you want to take Florida back? Anybody? Texas?
Take him. Leave Disney, though.
Yeah.
So, the Battle of Caen, theoretically the last engagement of the 100 Years' War, 1453. Good time had by all.
Especially the French.
Especially the French, because the English got their asses kicked.
Yeah.
So this was an engagement that you had been there.
I had been there, but I had not been at the actual site. In fact, I hadn't written at the time.
Yeah.
So, but I had read a couple of things that people said, oh, you can still see Jacques Barrot's artillery fortress.
Right.
Just in short, the French get there. They set Jean Barrot is the head of the army now. He's risen through the ranks as the master gunner, and he set up this field fortification with guns. And Talbot shows up ostensibly without even armor on.
Yeah. Talbot, being the leader of the English, shows up and attacks this field fortification.
Yeah.
According to the story, and gets trounced. I mean, is trounced effective?
Yeah, he should have. He gets killed.
He gets killed. Bob shouts from the crowd. Yeah.
That was actually merciful at that point.
Yeah. It was not good. It was not good. Didn't
read
go
the
good
manual.
well at all.
Now read the manual. It says, "Do not attack the French artillery fortress with a whole bunch of half-nude Englishmen." Oh, one half-nude Englishman. The rest of them were in armor. They still lost.
And they all still died anyway. Castione, I mean, it's an interesting battle, right? And we thought, well, we'll go there. I'm working on a book on the 100 Years' War. And so, hey, we're in the south of France. Why not?
Yeah.
As one does.
Yeah.
And went there. What was your, the first thing that you noticed when we went there?
It's a lot of land. It is, we often talk about battles. You can't go see the battlefield of Courtrai because houses are all over it. John France and I were talking tonight about what possibly could have happened at the Battle of Neville's Cross because there's a railroad through it. And I think, well,
Yeah.
they came up the railroad spur. That was clearly the Scots came.
Right in the middle of the suburbs, that battle. So
But,
weird.
There's nothing. I mean, they have planted trees back in the forest, which is a little confusing, we figured. But, it's unlike many battlefields in that you can see the whole field.
And we did. We walked it. I had done, as is typical for these sort of things.
Fell into it.
I didn't fall into it, Bob. I climbed
Out of it.
out of where I fell into. It was so much more magnificent than that. I'd done a lot of satellite work as I typically do, and so we had sort of like I always call it targeting package, going back to intelligence speak. So there's this feature in particular that on the satellite that you could see, and on LiDAR that you could see, that is we didn't know exactly what it was.
No, and it doesn't match. I mean, it really curls around. So even though we'd read Burn and we'd read, almost everybody who's been there says the fortress could still be seen.
Yeah.
It didn't look. I mean, it did. You would think somebody would plan out a fortress that would be planned along things. So we were a little confused at the beginning.
And we got to this thing, and it's not a field fortification. It's a.
Well, it may have been.
It's not.
Okay.
It may have been.
It's not.
I mean, it was used for this, right?
Yeah.
But it was a stream bed. It's an old stream bed. That's the reason it's kind of not straight.
No.
Streams don't run in straight lines. So it was this stream bed that we think then the French used.
Yeah.
Right. They found this existing feature in the landscape and used it, which was cool to see.
Yeah, it was cool.
And cool to recognize that. We couldn't find any indication of anything on the other side that was sort of built up.
Yeah. No left cannons.
there's no
Burrow
cannons
seems
there.
to have taken them away.
I don't know. He should have left one there.
He should have. There should have been a big sign. Horses were here.
Horses are here. There is a Talbot died here
Yeah, there's a memorial, isn't it?
monument.
And
which is
then
fun.
another monument to Burrow.
Further away.
Yeah, that's further away, but a little more
Hard
grand.
to find.
Hard to find, yeah.
Yeah, not
because
clear
it's
signage.
right on the main road, and we were not looking at the main road.
Yeah, we drove past it. Did we twice?
Yeah.
I don't know. We were going back and forth trying to find it. Finally, Bob's like, "There it is!"
Yeah.
And we were able to stop. So, I mean, Castillon, like, did you walk away feeling like you understood it more?
I understood it more. I
Good.
won't say I understand it totally, but I understood it more. Going back to the original sources afterwards, looking at them, it does almost, you recognize we've been mistranslating certain these things, that there is really Burrow, because he is, I mean, he's an individual who's come out of the ranks. The French have done that. Lahaire, during Joan of Arc, has moved out of the ranks. The English say, let's bring back a guy who's retired for 25 years.
Talbot, yeah.
Talbot. And, but Burrow, as a sensible individual, seems to have used the landscape to his advantage. As we always say, that's exactly what a medieval general would do.
I left more confused than ever. It literally, I cannot get my head around how Talbot goes into this position. The position has there's the main river, then there's a kind of smaller river that comes into that river, and it's right against that smaller river that this old stream bed runs, and that's where the French position was. The only way to get into this space where the English die is to go on a very, very small track. Like into this space, like you're walking into a death trap is what it is. And if you have any kind of scouting, you're walking into a death trap. And so I cannot fathom why Talbot walks into a death trap.
Well, there was a very simple answer.
Oh, Bob's got a simple answer for us all.
Simple answer. As usual.
Yeah, as
Bob,
usual.
simple.
Speak to me, Bob.
You will remember that
I will.
when Talbot's remains were dug up in Shropshire, they found a mouse nest.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was
As our colleague just pointed out, when
Yeah.
Talbot was finally dug up, his body, it had a mouse living in the skull.
Yeah.
That does explain a lot.
And I had
That
to keep.
explains a lot.
It does explain a lot, yeah.
how
I had to
much-
keep reminding these two that nobody is stupid. Talbot may just be a little bit deranged, little demented.
With the mouse.
With the mouse running around. I wonder, though, and we discussed this at the time. I haven't convinced Mike, which is as usual. But I really wonder if we want to look for decisive victory everywhere. And Talbot doesn't need a decisive victory. He just needs to win. He needs something to go back to Henry VI and say, yeah, I've won. I've done. I pushed it back. We've got Bordeaux for another week. We got Bordeaux for another couple of weeks. He doesn't achieve it, but that's really a loose. There's this. By the way, nobody can see this, but my colleague on the other side is not. He's kind of sneering a bit here, snickering a bit.
No, I don't buy it.
No, you don't buy it.
I don't buy it, but I also don't have anything better to sell. So I mean, there's that. I felt like Castillon. Typically, when investigate a battle, you get on site and everything makes sense. Once you get to the right site. This one,
we're at the right site.
I think we're at the right site. So, but I just don't know what the hell to do with it.
And that was before we got really confused by jumping a century back.
Oh well, yeah. Things got really funky when we started jumping back to Poitiers.
Yeah. So that was the next. One of the things we do go about 2 days down to Orleans, and I get to tell Mike, you can't move the city. It's there.
Yeah.
We could find battlefields all over the place. A little bit moved here, a little bit moved there. The city is the city. You can actually see the bridge that was fought over.
I did not move the siege of Orleans.
No. But Poitiers was interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, Poitiers was very interesting. Poitiers was there's multiple interpretations of Poitiers,
including ours for two. We'll do one episode on Poitiers.
Yeah, we've done an episode on Poitiers you might have listened to. I had never been there, and you've been there once, twice.
No, I've been there about 4 times.
4 times, 3, 4. Yeah, and so Kelly kind of had a working theory. We'd read all the other stuff about it. Got on site, and man, that was, we left there absolutely confused.
Absolutely confused.
I've started writing it up now, and I think we haven't pushed this by, but I got some stuff on it now.
And I was very fortunate because I went down to Florence afterwards. Niccolo Capone, who had done the translations for us for the Italian works in Crecy, wrote a very interesting article on why the Italian interest is there.
Very good article.
At Crecy. At Poitiers, there's one chronicle, but it's Giovanni Villani, who is an incredible Italian chronicler and historian from the early 14th century, or from the mid-14th century, but right about the early 14th century. His son, Matteo, writes an account of Poitiers that is extremely, extremely detailed. And fortunately, having a person who could actually translate medieval Italian, and I'm writing down 4,000 lines. 4,000 lines of detail.
It may be our biggest account of it. And it's one nobody uses.
Certainly our most detailed. And yet nobody knows it. Well, part of it is that most of the time the Villani and Giovanni or Matteo get edited from the 18th century on. They cut out everything but the Italian stuff. And here they are, this great father-son team on French battles. In fact, Giovanni is hoping that that Edward III, after Crecy, will pay off the debts he's accrued from the Bardi and Peruzzi, because Giovanni is actually in debt himself. Because
spoiler alert, he does not.
He does not. Jeez, what a shocker! And by the way, the Italians do not care after that. There's only Matteo who writes about Poitiers. Nobody writes about Agincourt.
Yeah.
Nobody writes. The Black Death seems to have killed off all of Northern Europe, according to the Italians. Well, everything above the Alps is gone, thank heavens.
It's toast. See ya.
Yeah.
It is fascinating. There's no Agincourt in these things, and everybody's
no Agincourt. It's just like it. Did not matter.
I don't want to diminish the importance of Agincourt because you need to buy my book in October, but
yes.
But also
soon on the bookstore.
Also, it's sort of it does diminish it. We now have this. We have a better translation coming to this source. It was cool to see Poitiers. I still need to go over it all. We're going to end up doing, I think, another episode on Poitiers.
I think we will.
That's going to be like, okay, we've been there. Here's the latest stuff we've got. So we're going to get to that. So we've been busy.
Yeah.
We've been busy.
Well, not to mention you alone this past week have been at Shrewsbury.
I've been at Shrewsbury. Yeah, I've been doing the battle of
geez.
Shrewsbury.
It is Shrewsbury. Look at the spelling.
We had a we
I'm from Stratford.
we had a on the documentary that I was doing. It was the first thing we discussed. I was like, okay, we got to be consistent.
Yeah.
I voted for Salop. I was like, let's just cut to the chase. Let's just do this right, and I got outvoted. So, but yeah, it's Shrewsbury, Bob. We went right for you. Yeah. I didn't want to face your anger if I did it wrong. Yes, I've been at Shrewsbury.
Yeah.
God,
So one more battle. We had with our
Bannockburn, it's been fun.
with our great friend Bob Wisdom Savage. We visited that battlefield a few years back,
We did.
and yeah,
We did. Was that the first time I met you, Bob?
I think it was.
It was the first time I met you.
Regretted it ever
And I've regretted it ever since.
I think he wouldn't sit still so we could shoot him in the face with an arrow.
Yeah, it's like,
Geez,
let's find
what else
out.
would we have Bob Wisdom Savage around for? He's a curator of sharp-edged weapons. We might as well use it.
Will this hurt? So yeah, we've been busy, but more than anything right now, I want to hear what questions any of you might have for us. And if you don't have any, it's fine. I got so many things we can talk about. But are there any things you? Yes, sir.
So given the talk about Cassio already,
Yeah.
do you feel like the 100 Years' War was an inevitable loss for England? And by extension, would it have been possible for someone like Henry V to take control of the King of France and keep it?
Wow. Repeat that. Yeah. Better repeat that question.
Yeah, I got to repeat that question.
Yeah.
All right. So our good friend in the audience, what's your name? Josh.
So he's obviously for the French side.
Josh, in our audience, asks with some ulterior motive. I put that totally on him. He did. Was the English loss of the 100 Years' War inevitable? Could Henry V, if he had survived, actually won this thing? What I'll let you go first. I have a very strong opinion.
So
on
the
this.
answer is it was inevitable.
Be very careful.
Yeah,
how
be
we
very
answer
careful.
this.
It was inevitable. The English couldn't have won. Okay, next question. No. That is tremendous, and my frenemy in absentia, Cliff Rogers, and I have talked about this frequently. Guess which side Cliff takes? He's so pro-England. It shames Englishmen how pro-English Cliff Rogers is. I love him with all my heart. He's an incredibly hard worker. Yeah. But so I think there was time. And Agincourt, there's no question. In fact, we were talking to the Siege of Orleans, and I was talking about how Ponton des Entrées is introduced in the Journal du Siège d'Orléans, which I believe is very much a contemporary account by the people of Orleans, who really are the victors there. Joan shows up and gets to be the mascot of the whole thing, and Joan of Arc is a great mascot to have on your side. But the Orleanais did not want to be English. That's very clear. And they introduced Ponton des Entrées as a man who knew not Agincourt. And we realized, his father was involved there, but that is the entire generation after Agincourt in France. They were so affected by that. Now, whether Henry could have capitalized on that, especially since he writes a treaty that says, oh, by the way, you will definitely die first, Charles, not me. So whoever comes out of me and Catherine, they're going to be king of all France. And then he predeceases Charles by 1 month.
Whoops.
1 month. Oops.
Whoops.
And Henry had been born. Henry VI had been born, 3 months earlier. So yeah, I don't. But after 1430. After Joan of Arc, and then especially after 1435 with the Arras Treaty, and the Burgundians give up. They do fight for the English on one battle, but then they go completely away for the 100 Years' War. England doesn't have a chance at that point. You.
All right. So I'm working on a book right now on the 100 Years' War, which basically says the 100 Years' War doesn't exist. So I'll start with that. Yeah, I think it's a 200 Years of war. And it is not about England versus France. I think it's about the definition of what France is. And in that sense, this is an inevitable loss. The one chance there is that glimmer of a window, and in Henry V's time, there is that glimmer of a window. But he plays the diplomacy wrong, and plays the expectation of his own life wrong, and at that point, it's over. It's over, and it's just working out the inevitability of it, which is, you know, I guess kind of a bit of a downer, as it were, if you're
Not
English.
for the French.
But it's pretty good for the French. They're pretty pumped about that. They think it's.
Do you think if Henry had lived,
No.
Do I think if Henry had lived, it would have worked? No, I don't think it would have worked. But I think there was a glimmer of a chance, right? That was the one window where if things had broken just right.
yeah,
But Henry has greatly mischaracterized. Not really mischaracterized. He's hoping he's in a better, stronger position than he really is.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh.
But you know, one of the things about this, I think maybe I got this from you, Kelly.
That is wrong.
I think I got this from you.
that was the death he got from him.
I got the Black Death from him. There's this wonderful historian of the American Civil War, Shelby Foote.
Yeah.
Did I get this from you?
Yeah, that's all right. Go with it.
All right, I got this from you. Wonderful historian, and he did this wonderful show called The Civil War by Ken Burns, documentary, really great stuff. And he's asked at one point, like, what would have happened had the Confederates won at Gettysburg? You know, if they'd actually won that fight, right? This is that kind of pivotal moment. And what was it that he said, Kelly?
He said they felt the Union had been fighting with one arm tied behind their back. Had they won at Gettysburg, the other arm would have come out.
I think it's pretty good.
I think it's really good. And I was asked to give a lecture a few years back on the economic history of the 100 Years' War, which was fun because I started with, it begins with a sheep.
Yeah.
You know.
That it does.
It does. You did. You heard that talk. It was good. And I think it was, I shouldn't say that. I think the talk was quite good. But one of the things I realized as I was looking at this, first of all, Gascony is extremely important to England. We don't realize that wine after wool, but I mean, far after, but still, wine is the second leading export for England. Now, I don't know whether you've checked, but there aren't grapes up here. So they're all coming out of Gascony, and that's very important. It's very important for the English, who, quite frankly, don't like, among the upper classes, aren't really into English ale. Wine is the thing. But economically, the southeast of France is never invested in the war. The Pope has to pay off the grand companies in the 1360s because they're raiding around Toulouse, but otherwise he's not even economically invested in the war. But the Angevins over there, René d'Anjou, all of them, René d'Anjou is never involved in the economic. There's never a huge investment economically in the 100 Years' War by the French. And the English can't even surround Orleans. They can't. They do not even have enough troops to surround Orleans.
It's called the Siege of Orleans. We keep, when we're on this trip, we kept calling it the demi-siege. Because it's like,
Joan of Arc shows up, goes in and out of the city. They're delivering troops.
What a siege.
Every once in a while, the journal says, oh, by the way, 15 Orleanais went out and sacked an English position, come back with a loot. Yeah.
So, I mean, great question. A great question.
A good follow-up would be, is there ever a time when Edward III thinks that he really is the king of France? I mean, Henry V, I think he does. Of course, Henry V, I think, is a little bit mentally deranged after Shrewsbury. Who would ever risk Agincourt? Who in their right mind would ever say, oh, yeah, look at those thousands of French and my few hundred. Let's go to battle.
Coming in October.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
But, I mean, Edward III seems, the battle and the Treaty of Brittany, he doesn't stick with the title. He really just wants the lands, and he really wants Calais because he can now move the wool staple. I mean, if we look at it economically, we have to have a totally different view of the 100 Years' War. You're doing that.
Yeah.
I've done in the past. Yeah.
Yeah. So great question, man. Great question. What other questions do we have? Yes, sir.
What is the most interesting battlefield you've ever visited?
Um,
Whether you can tell like the actual, whether you can tell if the land has actually been marked by the battle, or whether it's like completely gone, or whether there has been some archaeology on the site.
Freaking great question. What's your name?
Yeah.
Jasper.
Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, Jasper has asked, what is the absolutely most brilliant battlefield that we visit? Kind of our favorite that shows really kind of the effect of landscape on battle, like on conflict.
Yeah.
Then and now. What do you got?
Well, I think that's a great question because I've
Terrific question.
Yeah. John France, when I was a very young academic, by the way, John France is beyond us in any capacity as a military historian.
All hail John France.
Yeah, he really is brilliant. And he said to me once after he'd written this book on following the First Crusaders, and I said, John, that's 1,000 years ago. And he goes, yeah, but you can't believe what you can see and how it illuminates the research. And at that point, I go to my dean and say, I'd like money to travel the battlefield during the summer. And somehow he believed me. I mean, in the middle, I had to write a book on a saint, but it came through. We were at Istanbul the other day and looking at the walls and recognizing what Mehmed had done and not even focusing on other aspects because we were giving papers at the Suleiman Mosque. It was, I was worried because I'd written on Suleiman. I thought his ghost was going to rise up, slap me across the face and say, you were wrong.
I was hoping that was going to happen.
Yeah, he was hoping.
I was like, come on, Suleiman, get up here, baby.
I did go to Roxolana's tomb and try to get her to intercede because I think she had Suleiman's ear. But
it's not all she had. Good night, everybody.
But looking down for that mosque at the Bosphorus and at the Golden Horn and everything, you recognize what an absolute feat it was.
Oh, yeah.
But I must say roads. And I've written a lot on roads. Everybody calendar last year.
You can't just say roads.
Road
Which
City.
roads?
No,
you got two sieges.
Well,
you got to pick
yeah,
one.
yeah.
He asked for a battle. Well, I guess they're the same battlefield.
Yeah, same
but
battlefield.
I'm not going to let you get away with it. Which one?
The interesting thing is, and I've mentioned this in the past, maybe even on this broadcast, that Rhodes is a laboratory of gunpowder artillery change, anti-gunpowder artillery changes. So you see what happens in 1480. You can actually see it because the grandmasters put their coat of arms about every 18 feet. And so you can actually date these things. And the Rhodes, you could see then that the knights did everything. I mean, if you've ever been to Rhodes and see the Bastion on St. George, I'm like, the one thing is, I would say, I went with a National Geographic film crew. That is the greatest historical research tool ever because the National Geographic film crew could get it anywhere. And there was the lower part of the St. George Bastion that I'm snapping my flash because I can't see anything. They're the 300-pound cannonballs from Mehmed's siege on the floor. I might have broken my shins and they wanted one more interview. So that wouldn't have been good. But that, and then seeing the changes, 1480, they defeat the Ottoman army. They conquer the conqueror in 1480. And 1522, if we go by what is recorded that Suleiman said, he had lost 103,000 men.
He didn't. Listen to that episode.
I think it was pretty close. But Rhodes is, and you've gone Rhodes too. It's just.
Oh yes. Rhodes is incredible. So which 1480 or 1522?
I have to say 1522 because
1522.
You've got to see the Italian bastion at the other the end that's built in 1521 is remarkable. The fact that they had doubled the size of the moat, the fact they had doubled or tripled the size of the wall.
It is incredible.
And then they lose because Suleiman is, if it's not 103,000, he's willing to lose a lot of men.
If I'm picking Rhodes, I actually pick the other. I pick the first battle.
You pick 1480?
Yeah.
Why?
I just love the events of that.
It is. It is
Yeah,
true.
the sequence of events of that. Again, we're not going to talk about it now because we've talked about it. Yeah, go listen to the episode. Yeah, I mean the events of 1480 and the personnel.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that siege.
Yeah, Pierre d'Aubusson has got to be considered among the top medieval generals, I think.
Yeah, it's extraordinary what he does.
Yeah.
It really is. It's a good answer. Good answer. Good answer.
What's yours?
We'll allow it. We'll allow it. Agincourt. Agincourt, and not. I mean, honestly, not just because I just wrote a book on it, but because
Out in October.
because
What, there's a forthcoming book on that?
It's the latest. It's the latest.
it's the latest. Yeah, God.
That's an
Oh,
inside
God.
joke. Inside joke.
Yeah, so it Agincourt, the myth of Agincourt, like this nationalized myth, and it's so ingrained, and the fact that field, I mean, yeah, I sort of scoot the battle around a little bit, but we basically know where that is. It's so tightly triangulated, right? We know where that is, so you can stand there. And yes, I think it's not as important as everybody wants it to be, right? And
Certainly the Italians don't think it's
yeah,
important.
yeah, pretty much nobody else thinks it's very important. And really not that much changes in a sense after Agincourt. It has ramifications because of what's happened there, but in the event, but despite all that, I was raised on that myth, and the fact that you can sort of
We won.
it's not. Yes, you won, Bob. You won, and we're yes, you won, Bob. You, sir, you did so good. Who's a good Englishman? Who's a good Englishman?
Half Welsh, so be careful.
By the way, we did take Bob to Waterloo, and it's definitely Napoleon's victory because we couldn't see a little bust of Wellington anywhere in the shop.
No, where the gift shop was all Napoleon. I know who won that fight.
And so we kept telling him, the English clearly didn't win here. They would have a statue of Wellington that we could buy, a little bust, a coin.
There was an ashtray with Wellington.
An
was-
Wellington ashtray.
Wellington ashtray.
Oh,
So
then we
go
know
ahead,
definitely what
dump
happened.
your ashes in here because he didn't win.
I was just at Culloden, and the same thing. You're like, the English actually won this fight. Everything's Scotland. Everything's Scotland. I'm like, yay! But also, you didn't win. You all lost, and you were the bad guys. Anyway, I'm gonna get hate mail for that. Agincourt. That's my answer. I love Agincourt.
A great question. I mean, I was in the era last year. It was Cliff Rogers and the Cates and myself at Cabaret, and myself and. That was fascinating to look and try to figure out that one too, and then try to figure out what in the heck's happening, who's on what side, why do we have a Frenchman on one side, why do we have an Englishman, Guisclin and the Black Prince, I mean, buying off in northern Spain. The answer I would say is go to any and every battlefield.
Yeah, man.
It's almost as if, for a historian, that the souls of those who died there are calling out to you. Figure it out.
Yeah, and when you go, don't trust the signs. And I don't mean like they're wrong, but like ask why, right? You go and say, okay, well, why do we think that? Why do we know that? Because that it can really so much be a key to understanding what's happening. We were just talking at dinner over pints.
Of water.
Obviously. The Culloden is an interesting case for this because we know exactly where everybody died. So it's an inside-out battle, right? You know where the killing happened. So now you work backwards from that, right, to figure out how did they get to that point. Yeah. Whereas a lot of these, we got nothing, right? We have signage, right, but that doesn't mean squat. No. And so instead, you're trying to figure out how they got there and all that kind of stuff. So great question, great question. What other questions?
Oh wow, we've got a lot of questions.
Well, let's go over here. Yeah.
All right, continuing with national myths. On your Battle of Caen episode, if I'm quoting correctly, you described William Wallace as a bad guy, a thug, and Kelly, I believe you said an influencer.
Oh yeah.
More.
Yeah.
Tell me more. Why
William Wallace on TikTok is what you want, huh?
So the question is that we were not kind to William Wallace in our Battle of Falkirk episode. That we may or may not, it has been unconfirmed, have called him a thug.
No, I did. I can confirm that.
You can cover the and a bad guy. That was actually probably me.
Yeah, it probably
and
was.
when an influencer.
Yeah, I think
And an
that might
influence.
use
That sounds like you.
That would
sounds
be
like a
because I
misuse
have
of
no idea
influencer.
what influencer is.
Yeah, I'm like, can you? Let's start with defining. What the hell does that word mean for you?
What is the students right now? Are they Gen Z? Are they? I have no idea. And they keep coming up to me and look at me like, well, back in the olden days.
We don't use words we don't know the meaning to, Kelly.
Is that right?
Yes.
Military history.
On a podcast where it
Actually-
can be quoted back to you.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So Kelly, explain yourself.
Yeah, an influencer. It was interesting because Braveheart came out in the United States before it came out in the UK. What a shocker. They wanted to try it out on Americans. You know, what do you think about this Australian running up and down saying freedom? And then I came over to conference. I was the only American, all these military historians from England. And Matthew Strickland, if you know him, great historian, great guy. And he had set it up so we could discuss things in the evening. But everybody found out I'd seen Braveheart. They all wanted, what happened? I have to tell Michael Prestwich that somehow Braveheart is the father of Edward III. And Michael Prestwich just delightfully put his arm around and said, I'm fully willing to believe that Edward, he had affairs with men, but he had 5 children. That's a heck of a long time and some really good, effective.
But what about Wallace? Why is he a bad guy, Kelly?
Well, so I went back and told I teach a class of legends and medieval history. My students said, let's do Wallace. I introduced them to Blind Harry, Blint Harry, whatever you want to call him, and to some secondary sources. At the end, I said, so who should we drop? Oh, Wallace. He was just a thug. And I think it was explained to me best, and now I'm trying to remember who did it at that conference, but it was explained to me that Robert Bruce is England's idea of a Scottish hero, and William Wallace is Scotland's idea of a Scottish hero. And I thought, oh, that's pretty good.
Part of Scotland you lived in.
Well, yes. But I'm looking.
The place where Wallace came along and burnt down the town.
Yeah, well, if Wallace came in and burned down the town, then obviously it was a freedom fighter going at it.
Yeah.
With our Berian contingent here. What do you guys think about El Cid? Muslim warrior, Christian hero. I mean, it's the same thing, isn't it? Whichever way you look. For an American student perspective, after having seen the Braveheart movie, they were quite disappointed in the real William Wallace. So I think that's what led me to say what I did.
And I would say, in as much as we can figure out who the real William Wallace is, right? I mean, this is one of the real problems we've got with him, is that you have to use, like, Blind Harry. Is this guy reliable? I mean, that's a huge problem. And if anybody here is into Scots, I mean, it's quite something, trying to unpack what we can actually glean of the real man. But if you trust Blind Harry, you got a lot of atrocities, a lot of bad stuff that guy does. You shouldn't commit atrocities.
No,
is the thing.
Kind of
like just
Richard Lionheart, calling Richard Lionheart. Yeah, that's the one.
Are you trying to prevent me from getting out of this country alive?
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm trying desperately.
Yeah,
John was such a good king.
Oh, John Lackland. How about that guy? The most major source we've got on him is just one atrocity after another. He's just a bad guy. I mean, obviously, I'm an American, right? I'm a mutt, right? But at some level, I'm from Scotland. Way back when. So, like, that should be my team, but I'm like, I don't really want this guy on my team.
No.
He's not so good. I might believe in the cause, but yeah. Where the hell were you getting influencer from? What were you thinking?
I have a.
Sit at the bar.
No, yes.
Like, it was.
What was I drinking that night? If it was Falkirk, it may have been a very, very hard scotch, and so I may well have been into it.
Was I drinking Macallan's?
I think you were drinking Macallan's. I think at that point I was going,
oh my God, Macallan's is so good.
Yeah. Let me call an audible because Nick Morton back there, one of my favorite historians, and who explained military history to a very good but very ignorant crowd last year at the Crusade session. Thank you, Nick.
That's very kind of you. Thank you. Okay, I've got a question. It's not my theory. It's John Francis.
Oh.
So many good military history theories. He wrote a fabulous book on the French monarchy at war, which came out very recently.
Yeah.
And for me, at least, one of the big take-homes from that book was a question he raised about the influence of the Crusades and the conduct of war in France. His view on that question is that there's remarkably little evidence of any serious impact of the Crusades, or indeed the wars of the Crusader states, on the conduct of war in France at this time. That's a very thought-provoking line, and I was interested to hear what your view on it was.
Oh, very good. And so the question was that John Francis has recently written a very good book, Medieval France at War.
Such a good book.
And he suggests that the Crusades had very limited effect on war making, on war conducting, I would say also, of France. Am I saying that correct? Yeah. I won't ask what you think, Nick, about that.
You can ask, but I've asked you first.
Okay.
Touche.
Last year, Nick and I played counterfactuals. We had lots of fun. What if Frederick Barbarossa lives? That is a good. You want to take that one first? No, he's still laughing. He's still laughing at the counterfactuals.
I'm sorry, not just
Didn't
every
we
time.
have fun doing those?
Frederick Barbarossa crossing that
as
river
graduate
every
students,
time. It's
the
so
graduate
great.
students went into immediate conflict. Oh, I don't know. We're just drinking more. Oh, geez, if Frederick Barbarossa, do they listen to, Philip? No. Philip and Richard listen to no one. It doesn't matter if the emperor shows up. He just dies anyway.
Getting back to the question.
Okay, back to the question. Medieval France. So I think that there are, and I won't take this just for medieval France, because I think there are specifics. John is looking specifically at medieval France and that issue. We have to look at Europe as a whole. Everybody's involved in the Crusades, so how does it come back? How does it influence Italy? How does it influence Germany? How does it influence especially the Low Countries, which I've looked at? I think that there are some tangibles, like technology. I think technology is completely changed by the Crusade experience. They all go off looking like the Bayeux Tapestry. They run into, nobody was a horse archer in Hastings. That may have changed a few things. Harold Godwinson has a couple of horse archers riding around. They're changing the armor. They're changing the weapons. What we see in for example, the picture Bible, the Mysiowski Psalter, very different armor than we see at the very beginning. Fortifications. I think that's we go almost away completely from earth and wood fortifications to stone fortifications. That's got to be an influence coming out of the Holy Land. The actual conduct of war. I think almost every conduct of war is specifically fit to the enemy you're fighting. And nobody's going to be like the Muslims they fight in the Middle East. And in Egypt, and maybe even in Tunisia if they'd gotten past the coastline. And so I would suggest that I think John's right, because the French, boy, the Freudian slip there, because the French come back and they have to face things like the Flemings, and then we'll have to face the English, and they will have to face Germans, and they're not going to fight. They're not going to see a lot of horse archers. They're not going to see a lot of lighter cavalry, and so I would agree with John in that regard. But I think the outside influences, the military technology, maybe even the thought of how Europe starts seeing itself, the potential of the Pope, Innocent III, cannot call a crusade. And then, let alone Eugenius III in 1453. He says to the Byzantines, "Oh yeah, just become Christian, and I'll call a crusade." He can't do it, but Urban was able to. How's that possible? Second Crusade, even the failures are going to present a third crusade, fourth crusade. Well, we'll slip that in. So that would be my answer. Is I think that there are certainly things that can't be diffused.
Yeah, it's a good answer. This is when I have the utmost respect for John. I really do. John's a living saint. But this is one of my it's right and wrong, depending on definitions, as so many things come down. Right? There's clearly a political, economic, And all of those things have to do with war. You can't separate war making from politics and religion and all. Like, it's everything. War is all encompassing. And in the sense that it's all encompassing, the Crusades has this enormous impact on what's going on in France. Just looking at the way Philip Augustus is playing everything across that crusade, and how he's playing Richard and everything. I mean, that's the Crusades is a part of that. So it's a part of the war in that sense. But I would agree with you, Kelly, that on a sort of tactical level, you don't see a lot of crossover. There are elements of it in technology and fortifications, as you pointed out, but they're such different enemies, and that's you make war against the enemy you have. Often you make against the enemy that you just had, right? You tend to be fighting the last bloody war, but in any respect, you're trying to do it against this enemy, and you're trying to respond to that enemy, and it's very different as it is. But yes, there absolutely is an impact because of all these other things in how you even define self, how Europe is defined. I don't see that you can break that apart from crusading. It's part of it.
I think one thing we could say is that the thought process. I mean, it's interesting that after Philip IV loses to the Flemings, that everybody, first of all, the Pope Boniface VIII comes out and says, "Oh, by the way, I meant it. Don't tax the churches. That thing you ignored in 1298. I'm going to redo it." And he puts it out there, and the French churches, except for one that I found, all give their money to Philip, even though the Pope has said no. And yet the sermons, what has Philip been doing? Sending sermons around, sending the people around. It's, if those damn Flemings, we'd be in the Holy Land right now. We had won it back. Jerusalem would be ours. So the mind of Europe may change, at least not strategically, if not tactically, strategically, and certainly in a worldwide sense. By 1304, the enemy has really changed. Certainly when Philip VI repeats the same thing, we could be back in the Holy Land if we had just not have to fight the English. Well, the Flemings first, then the English Flemings are always the problem. We'd be in the Holy Land. You think, in 1328, the Holy Land you probably probably have it. It's the Ottomans you got to worry about. And the Byzantines understand that. They will understand by the end of the century, but it's still a very good thing to say. We'd be in the Holy Land right now. If only we didn't have to do it.
Yeah, it becomes propagandistic.
Yeah.
Great question.
Oh, wow.
You pick.
Young woman back to them.
Who do you think is the most historically undervalued character in the 100 Years' War?
Ooh.
Who is what's your name?
Joan of Arc, because nobody writes about Joan.
Emily. Emily asks, who's the most historically undervalued personage in the 100 Years' War? Bertrand de Gascoigne. That would be my answer.
Yeah, well, he does have a biographer.
Yeah. But how many people have heard of him compared to Joan?
Yeah, I think it's Philip the Good of Burgundy. I think Philip decides what's happening in the 100 Years' War. After Compiègne, when he has lost, he's captured this woman that he has no idea why the English are afraid of, because he captures her the first time he meets her. Joan, yes, Joan of Arc. He's lost his artillery. He sends the bill to the English and says, "All right, guys, you lost this." Monstrelet writes a very interesting line. He says, "The English, the Burgundians, the English lost the Burgundians' artillery train, and it was Philip's." It's kind of exasperated. How dare the English? I think that's why 4 years later he's gone, and he decides at that moment there's no holding out for England. So he's not necessarily a political or military leader. He's not there on the battlefield. John the Fearless goes, boop, boop, boop. Let's go see the Bridge of Montereau. I've heard it's nice. But Philip, yeah.
All right, good. What next question? Yes, sir.
Well, we all know what Kelly thinks of Richard the Lionheart.
What?
Who do you think is the most underrated commander?
Who is the most underrated commander? And Kelly cannot say Richard the Lionheart. Is that my understanding?
Overrated. Overrated.
Underrated. Who's the most underrated commander?
Oh, Talbot.
Talbot. Talbot. What a genius. It almost worked.
You know, we can't drink.
If it hadn't been for you dastardly French. Who's the most underrated commander? Underrated.
That's a very good question. You have one? Are you talking about just on New Year's War or all throughout?
Just general.
And just in general?
Just in general.
Braxton Bragg. No.
Braxton Bragg.
He was terrible as a Civil War general. American Civil War general. Sorry.
Deep cut for a different podcast.
Yeah,
my
for a
friend.
different podcast, yeah.
No. Who would you like?
Well, you know, I've said it before, Pierre d'Aubusson. I mean, he if you think about the Hospitallers being out on that island, and, you know, we know Cyprus is still in Christian hands, depending on what day of the week it is. But Rhodes, I mean, he's out there in the middle of nowhere. He knows that every single letter that goes out from 1440 on, and that'll continue to 1522, every single letter that the Hospitallers send to anybody, it ends with, and the Ottomans will be here soon, and the Turks will be on the door, and back and forth. He prepares that city, and he faces off. Now, Mehmed, because he's ill, will die from that illness a year later, isn't there. So the decisions have to be made by a Paleo guy who is the general on the opposite side. But d'Aubusson prepares that city, and he understands theater too. It's when he rides out, because the Ottomans are sending up their cannons, and he rides out on the mole to the fortification out on the mole, and he rides out in white with a white cape flying behind him on a white horse, and he rides back and forth on this so that the Turks can see him just across the way. And you think, that he knows that this is an issue that is far beyond blood. This is an issue that's going to be men, women, children in the city. Jews, which he will later cast out, which I think is dreadful when he becomes Cardinal of all Asia, but also that this is one in the hearts of the men and the citizens of the city. Leo Adam can't do that in 1522. So that's a long answer. You're going to give a very short one in comparison.
Yeah, you already know my answer. Bertrand de Gascoigne. He does have a biographer and all that, but
He's had a film made of him.
he has a film. This man should have 100 films about him. Bertrand de Gascoigne is such an extraordinary figure before he does, and he doesn't get the attention, I don't think, because that period doesn't get much attention. That sort of Poitiers to Agincourt period gets kind of
Poitiers to the 1380s, really, and then we get this piece that
muddled about, and it doesn't get thought of much. And his strategy throughout that he's essentially a Fabian strategy, that simplifying it quite a bit, but his success just again and again. I mean, from the absolute lowest point that France is at, he's the mind that helps bring this back, and I just don't think that gets nearly enough attention.
Absolutely agree. One of the things we forget, and I mentioned Jean Barrot, the French are willing to rise people from the ranks.
Yeah.
They're willing to put everything in the hands of a peasant from Dom Remy. They're willing to risk anything. They recognize this, where the English won't do anything that isn't rank associated, that isn't noble associated. Bringing Talbot back in 1453, he hadn't fought for 20 years.
Yeah.
What are they thinking? Well, Richard of York is not great. He's lost Normandy. But what is Henry VI thinking?
And Bertrand de Gascoigne is known as the Black Dog. I mean, come on, that's awesome.
That is.
That is awesome.
I've seen his heart. We've seen that kind of weird effigy in Saint-Denis, but his heart's down in Dinant.
I was going to make a joke about leaving one's heart in San Francisco, but
in Dinant.
we probably got one time for maybe one more question. What do we got, sir?
Now we're very frightened.
You know my name, but it's difficult to pronounce. I am curious about something you said earlier. I thought that was very interesting. What would have happened,
Our Viking friend Horther wants to know what actually would have happened had Ferdinand Barbarossa known how to swim.
Yeah, Frederick Barbarossa known how to swim. Yeah, you do kind of wonder. I do kind of wonder the Germans on the side going, so shouldn't somebody go in?
Shouldn't somebody go in?
Shouldn't they pull them out? Well, we can go home. We just wait, It is one of those things. So it is an interesting question, and I did pull this on my friend Nick, and because he's much more of an authority. I think you said that you thought that Philip and Richard might have listened to it because of the title.
The problem is that when the German army moves on to Antioch after Frederick's death, it's hit by disease and loses most of its numbers. And so if Frederick had lived, there's a very good chance he just got killed a few months later.
Yeah, for a few more weeks of Frederick Barbarossa's presence, you could have had him. It's a very unglamorous answer, No, Frederick shows up in all his finery, and Richard prostrate in front of him.
Those listening at home, Nick Morton just said that probably Frederick just dies of the disease in camp a few months later. Yeah, probably. I wouldn't think it would change hardly much at all. I guess I'm really a pessimist about the whole thing, about how much anybody listens to Frederick Barbarossa. I mean, but I also, frankly, think that already this crusade is cooked, because Philippe and Richard are not going to work well together.
No.
And nobody external, I think, is really going to solve that problem.
No, that's an interesting question. The other thing, though, that I've wondered, and this was because I was thinking about this counterfactual that we posed, is do you think that Richard then doesn't shame the Duke of Austria because the Duke of Austria has got his emperor there, so we don't get Richard shaming the Duke of Austria, so we don't get him captured and held in prison. So John doesn't get the power, he does. I mean, the fact that Frederick dies may have consequences not just associated with his death, but his absence. And it's an interesting question. I mean, I think, as you've heard, I'm not really fond of Richard the Lionheart. Geez, it's good to have a brother named John afterwards. If you're the worst king of England and the really worst king of England follows you, you're a lot better. So he goes looping back, let's go visit the Duke of Austria. He will gladly have us in court. I think that may have been more significant in the long run, and looking. Of course, nobody would have expected at that time. But it's an interesting counterfactual. We can think of all of them. What if Joan of Arc doesn't show up? Does that matter in the 1430 scheme of things? Does the Bastard of Orleans at that point withdraw from Orleans, or at least stay out and not attack? I mean, there's a lot. It's what makes medieval military history so interesting.
If that arrowhead goes 1 millimeter deeper into the head of Prince Hal, what the hell happens in history?
Yeah.
I mean, 1 millimeter or to one side or another, history changes.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
And not just because you don't have an Agincourt, but because you've got a John the Fearless who now has no allies in his civil war against the Armagnacs in France. Does he now rise up and become the leader, or does he shrink back? I mean, there's just a whole bunch of ripple effects in this, and with Frederick Barbarossa, that's one of the interesting ones. What happens if there's no Vikings? Oh, sorry. That's both are just disappeared.
Well, this.
Kirk Douglas in the movie.
Yeah. So I hope you all enjoy this. This has been fascinating. This is an experiment.
Yes.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can do this
I
again.
see Peter going back saying, scrub the whole thing.
Yeah, scrub the whole thing. He's like, delete.
That'll change in about 5 minutes.
Yeah. We'll be drinking soon enough. Please do join us next time. I hope everybody enjoyed this. Please do join us next time. We'll be talking about the battle. Oh God, I have to say it.
Yeah, you have to. How are you going to pronounce it?
Othay.
Othay. Othee. 1408.
Yes, we debated back and forth on whether we should say Othay or Otay.
Or Otay, yeah.
Somebody will correct us. Yeah. As ever, a reminder This podcast is sponsored by medievalists.net. So the best way to support us, other than buying our individual books, of course, is to join their Patreon at patreon.com/medievalists. That's also the absolute best place, except for here at the Congress at Leeds, to talk to us if you have a question for our Q&As. So thank you for listening.
And thank you all.
Thank you all for being here.
For your questions. Woo! We really appreciate it.
Thank you all. Seriously, thank you all for coming. Well done. Well done. Good questions.